My name is Jake Brillhart. I serve as the University of Kansas Pre-Law Advisor. In partnership with the University Career Center and other campus offices, we work with over 700 pre-law students interested in careers in public service, business and commerce, and changing the world. Pre-law students come from nearly every undergraduate major here at KU, and as graduates, they go far. Jayhawks can be found in nearly every state in over 100 countries around the world. Tonight, we invite 3 alumni to share their stories of how their KU degree took them far and how legal education prepared them for your career. I invite you tonight to connect, engage, and stay curious about where a KU degree can take you. We also ask that you please mute your microphones at this time. Throughout this panel, you're welcome to use the Q&A and chat function to submit questions, and we'll have time later when panelists can answer your burning questions. It is my pleasure to now introduce tonight's 3 panelists. In the class of 2013 and 2016, Chris Teter graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and continued education at the University of Kansas School of Law. While in law school, Chris served as a research attorney under Judge Bruns for the Kansas Court of Appeals. Upon graduation, Chris clerked in the U.S. District Court of Appeals for the District of Kansas under Magistrate Judge Gary Sebelius. Chris now serves as Assistant Attorney General for the Consumer Protection Division in the Kansas Attorney General's office. As a result of his litigation, Chris has helped recover approximately $340 million for the state of Kansas to support opioid and substance abuse disorders. Hugh, class of 2018, graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Behavioral Neuroscience. As an undergraduate student, Hugh served as the president of Phi Alpha Delta, the National Pre-Law Fraternity. After graduation, Hugh attended Northwestern School of Law and now works for the firm Moore and Van Allen in North Carolina. He primarily works with banks and other financial institutions in transactional law and is admitted to the bar in the state of North Carolina and the state of Texas. Annie Bailey graduated from the University of Kansas in 2011 with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. Several years later, she continued her education at Marshall University, where she completed a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership. In 2020, Annie graduated with a Master's of Jurisprudence from the University of Washington. A former United States Marine Corps officer, Annie now works for Deloitte, a multinational consulting company, as a human capital senior consultant. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight's panel will be recorded, and attendees can access this recording through the University Career Center's YouTube channel. Let's begin with some questions. Panelists, can you briefly introduce yourselves a little bit more, including your current position and what a day in your life looks like?
Well, I can go first. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Teters, and as Jake indicated, I am an Assistant Attorney General for the Kansas Attorney General's office. And just to describe a little bit about what I do in that office, I primarily work on 2 areas of law. First, I'm primarily focused on antitrust, which, if you have not been paying attention to the news recently, has gotten to the hottest stage it's been in U.S. law enforcement for antitrust since probably the 1970s or earlier, with major cases against Google, Amazon, previous cases against Facebook, and a variety of different cases, including one that I work on every day, which is a case against nearly every generic drug manufacturer within the United States for a conspiracy to manipulate generic drug prices. So an average day in my life is usually interfacing with states, assistant attorney generals from a variety of different states on a number of different issues, including antitrust in generic drugs, opioids related matters, insulin case related matters, or just general multi-state matters. Today, for instance, I had 3 separate meetings of 3 different groups on each of those separate matters. And we work very closely at an AG level to ensure our enforcement is effective and while reaching the largest impact that we can across the states.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. So I'm out of the Seattle area, as Jake mentioned. So I work at Deloitte as a human capital consultant. I've done consulting a lot of my professional career outside of the Marine Corps. So I'll kind of go a little bit back and then I'll get back to where I am now. So I commissioned out of University of Kansas NROTC. So I went straight into the Marine Corps. I was an intelligence officer, spent most of my time out in Okinawa, Japan. And then once I got out of the Marine Corps in 2016, I transitioned back. I opened a business. I actually own a CrossFit gym here in Bellevue, Washington. Another interesting facet of law, both with employees and then just opening a business in general. While I was pursuing my master's of jurisprudence at University of Washington School of Law, I studied basically, I'll talk a little bit more about the MJ program, but you can have just kind of subcategories of things you're focused on. So it's basically like a major outside of your master's jurisprudence. So I focused on sustainable international development, which led me to a consulting firm that focused on public and private partnerships in ESG. So all things social impact. So really interesting work, like combining like USAID and PepsiCo to align with some of their objectives in ways that benefited like low-income farmers and stuff like that. And then I ended up at Deloitte as a human capital consultant. Law is woven into everything I do every single day. It's a lens through which we see things, which I think is a really, really valuable thing. And I'm happy to talk more about that. But I focus primarily on people strategy. So not just HR, but more how you can develop more equitable programs for your employees in general. So I typically work with major tech firms, but I've also worked with other major consulting firms and help them achieve those goals. So that's a lot of what my life looks like on a daily basis. Similar to the Marine Corps, I build a lot of PowerPoints, but I'd like to think my work is a little deeper than that on the regular. So it's been a fascinating ride nonetheless. But like I said, every single weird thing I've touched, law has something to do with it. Hugh, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Annie. Appreciate that. I can let you know that I have, I would say, a much less interesting life than my fellow panelists here. But I'm originally from Kansas. I went to Johnson County Community College for a couple of years, played soccer there, and then went to the University of Kansas, and then moved up to Chicago, which is considerably more cold than Kansas. So after I left law school, I went down to Dallas for a couple of years and moved out to North Carolina about a year ago. Primarily, I work with financial institutions outside of New York. Charlotte, North Carolina is the largest financial center in America, which I was unaware of, but it's extremely large there. And so I work primarily with just major banks, and I do private equity transactions primarily, but essentially people just want to get money to do a lot of various business aspects, whether it be to hire more employees or to acquire another business or simply to just keep the business running. And so I work with a lot of banks, and I do a lot of phone calls where people say they want things, and then we, as lawyers, make it a lot more words than it probably should be. But
Amazing stories. So Chris, you work in a government role. Annie, you work in a consulting role. Hugh, you work in a private firm. Tell us a little bit more. What drew you to a legal education, and how did you decide on this career path in your profession, in your chosen profession?
Jake, can you repeat the second half of the question? I totally missed that. My dogs are munching on bones.
Absolutely. How did you choose your chosen profession? What made you interlink your interest in legal education and what you're doing now?
Sure. So I was a sociology undergrad, so always been a save the world type. Shout out to all of you who are that way. And I think that was something that, I think sociology is a fascinating world where you dip into a lot of inequality. You focus on society as it is and different ways that we interact in our societies as a whole. And then, going into the Marine Corps, I spent most of my time in Asia, so I got to experience a lot of seeing that play out and seeing how people interact in societies that are very equitable and some that are very not equitable. And I think that my missing understanding was always this the law piece. It's why can't we do more? Or why can't we play a more significant hand in this? Or from an international aid standpoint, why is some of this money, why are we spending so much money not seeing a lot for it? And so there were all these different things that were always going through my mind on how could we better use and make an impact with not just funds, but any resources, whether it's time or military or these other different pieces or NGOs. And so those have always been things that have kind of gone through my mind. And so when I saw the master's of jurisprudence at University of Washington that had this focus on sustainable international development. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the most beautiful intersection I've ever seen. And I think that, you know, similarly, trying to do what I do now, which is create more equitable systems and like increase access to opportunity. You know, I think that that's woven, and that's my through line through everything that I've tried to do. And so I think that the Master's of Jurisprudence program was amazing because I got to see and like touch law. If people aren't very familiar with the program, essentially it's like essentially a 2-year program. So we were able to go through a lot of the foundational law school courses. And then there were some where we got to branch off and kind of start studying our own thing. So the sustainable international development stuff had a lot to do with like international law, international aid, the way a lot of these large like international agencies work together, and often do not work together. Namaste. But you know, that's always been a big part of the struggle. And so then when I go in and I'm doing my job on a daily basis and I'm working with employment law from across the world, and we're trying to create more equitable systems and they all have different requirements, you're really trying to weave this all together. And so I think that that's been a fascinating journey of mine. I wish I could say I might have a huge trajectory. Clearly with my career, I have a attention span of a goldfish, but like, it's all been the same kind of work. You know, it's all been service oriented. It's all been, how do we do more with less? And so I think that there's always been those through lines, and law's been a really, really consistent anchor for me in making a lot of those things possible. So very grateful for that facet of my education.
Yeah, and I think I would kind of echo a lot of the comments that Annie made. I started off as a neuroscience major. I really just picked it because I spent a lot of time around athletic trainers, and I was like, oh, I like science stuff, I guess. And fortunately, you know, you can major in anything and go to law school, so that's really beneficial. And I was like, well, let me just pick something that I like. And I kind of came to it because I just wanted to help people. As you know, I spent a lot of time, like I said, with athletic trainers, and they help you get ready and prepare for what it is that you have to do out there on the field. And I was like, oh, I kind of like helping people kind of achieve their goals. And as I got more into the neuroscience aspect of it, I was like, well, you know, I think really in the sense of, and especially in the athletic training sense, you really get people after they're injured. Most of them don't like to come to you beforehand. They just prefer not to have gotten hurt. And so I kind of looked at what my other options were. And, you know, law, it's such a huge field and it touches every single thing that you could ever even imagine. And so I found like you can kind of get ahead of some of that stuff. You know, no one wants to go to the doctor. They would just prefer to never be sick versus, you know, a lot of people want to do things like start a business and they're like, yeah, of course, you know, I'll reach out to these attorneys, or I want to make a change. I don't like the way that things are going in the world. You know, we can try to make policies or laws, and almost always lawyers get involved, either when it comes to writing those things or also when it comes to just kind of just getting advice. I think that people consider lawyers to be very well versed, and they touch so many different things. We kind of get trained in the way of thinking rather than trained in the way of thinking, then more specialization. And so I think that people just tend to rely on the legal profession when it comes to those. And so being able to get ahead and being able to help people out in front rather than after a problem was kind of the way that I arrived there.
And I'll have a completely contrary approach that I got to law than Annie and Hugh. I wanted to make video games. I was convinced I was going to make video games. I went to KU to become a computer scientist so I could study all the opportunities to make video games. I made a video game. I hated it. And I needed something else to do. And what led me to law from there was I was in my dorm room like junior year on a Friday, and I was reading a court opinion and realized I was just doing that for fun on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening. And I looked up and I said to my roommates, I need to get paid for this. And I decided to go to law school from there. Once I got into law school, I had three kind of driving ideas that I wanted to do. I wanted to either do intellectual property law, like patents, copyrights, those sorts of things. I wanted to do politics, or I wanted to do some kind of public service or government related law. Well, I tried politics, didn't like it. I tried intellectual property. I thought patents were one of the most boring things I've ever done in my life. And so I ended up going to be a clerk for a Court of Appeals judge after law school, and then a federal judge after that. And just decided that I wanted to keep pursuing that public service career because I love public service, and sort of stumbled into the opportunity to do consumer protection, opioids work. Quite literally, I applied for a different job at the AG's office, and they said, no, but what about, do you want to sue Purdue and a bunch of these other major drug companies? And I said, well, I've never sued anybody before, but sure, I'd love to try. And that's sort of what led to me getting into the last nearly 5 years of my life working on opioid and substance use work, and then kind of adjacently into more antitrust and other broader social issues. So while I didn't start in the same place as Annie and Hugh, I did sort of end up in that same public service or general service of others mindset. And I think that's a very important mindset for regardless of what field you end up in. As an attorney, you are going to be working with other people to help serve other people, regardless of if it's private or public. And you have to be able to deal with that as a driving factor in that field.
You touched on a really kind of key point. I want to make sure we uplift this. You said there was no pre-law major, and that is absolutely right. You can pursue any undergraduate degree and prepare for legal education. Now, Chris, you and Annie, you all did your undergraduate degrees here. Were there any type of classes or experiences, clubs or extracurricular that you thought, man, this just really got me fired up for law school, or this really helped me develop the skills, the perspectives I need to be successful in a legal education? Annie, let's start with you this time.
Sure. I would say mine was less rosy than that. It was like frustration. I was like learning about all these things and you're just like, but why? Like there was just so much like, it's got to get better. Like we got to do more. And so I focused a lot on international sociology. So focused a lot on like classes about Africa and Asia and like some of these other areas. And I think also obviously my military lens, like doing ROTC all the way through, and then also seeing that side and like how can like we better serve from a position of opportunity and like privilege that a lot of us come from. How can we like maximize our impact? And I realized that like a huge thing holding me back was like my lack of understanding of the way law works. And like, you know, we all take those basic law classes, or not law classes, but like American government classes and stuff in high school. I don't know about y'all, but that was not what I was focused on like in high school. And so it's like coming back to it and being like, this is when I needed this in my life, was like when I'm at a point where I can appreciate it so much more. And you watch the news and it changes the way you view a lot of things. That I think our world is very like, we try to make things really black and white. We try to say like, you align here or you align here, you're with this party or this party, or like you feel this way or this way. And the world is not all like that, like at all. And the more you get into these complex situations, I'm sure everyone on this group can testify that that's been true with their experience as well, is that I think law helps you cut through a lot of that, and understanding that like there are very few universal truths. And like, I think law will help you realize that there's mediums in between, and there's like ways that you can work through a lot of the challenges that we see on a daily basis through a legal like medium. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like suing somebody, but man, that's, you know, that's a route, you know? And so I think that there's understanding that all those opportunities are available to you, and understanding like what it means to actually vote. Like, what are you actually doing with your vote? Like, so it adds a lot of value in your own life too, in your own experience as like an American citizen. So I think that like my study in sociology and focusing a lot on these areas where I just wish we could do more, law helped me understand how and why, maybe why things weren't working, and how we can continue to do better in the future.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. I'll tell you, part of what got me as a like an organizational or group level interested in law was I lived in a scholarship hall at KU. And one of the things and I took a leadership role in that position. One of the things you learn in really any leadership role is conflict avoidance and conflict resolution when you can't avoid the conflict. And a lot of the way we worked was in pseudo legal fashion, right? We had procedures, we had there was a disciplinary procedure if people didn't follow the rules of the house, and that sort of pseudo legal structure really, I think, opened my mind to how that legal process, that conflict avoidance and conflict resolution process, is applied in a broader sense. And I wanted to go learn more about how that system works and doesn't work. I mean, it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work, in a broader legal sense. And when I got to law school, what I realized was a lot like what Annie said. There are no universal truths. There are simply conflicts that are trying to be resolved, and what the best way that we possibly can get those resolved. And I really appreciate that the opportunities I had with my scholarship hall to take that in a safe environment to learn those skills of conflict avoidance, conflict resolution, and apply them to kind of the legal career. Beyond that, and unfortunately, I didn't get to participate in it, but I do know how successful it is. The mock trial program at KU is really good, and if you are interested at all in being a litigator, that program gives you a lot of that on the ground kind of experience of doing the research, the case prep, the public performance aspects, if that is at all something that you're interested in.
Yeah, kind of. I would say I participated in probably way too many things. Not in a negative way. I enjoyed it, but I'd signed up for pretty much anything I possibly could have. So I was in the pre-law fraternity. I felt like that was really great because it was kind of an opportunity to just see other people who were interested in the law, and there was different programming that would come up and tell you. I don't have any lawyers in my family. I didn't know anybody, and so I was like, I don't really know what happens here or what people do. I thought everyone went to court, and as Chris mentioned, if you want to be a litigator, like that's where you'll be up at. I joke around and tell people that if I'm in court, it's going to be a congressional hearing, and it's not going to go very well. But I was in the KU pre-law fraternity. I think another one, I was on the Court of Appeals for the university, and most of that was like disputes about elections for student board government, like whether they were qualified or not, or whether some people invalidly went on Wesco Beach and tried to solicit voters. So there was a lot of conflicts that were like that, which I thought were interesting. But just kind of getting the chance to dive in and read about what are the university's policies. I mean, we all signed that piece of paper that says that we know what they are. I definitely did not know what they were at the time, but you just get a chance to see like, hey, how can a set of rules help move the needle for pretty much anything that it is that you wanted to do. And I think most important out of these was, or the most important thing I got out of joining a lot of stuff was just meeting people and getting a chance to see what they did in their lives. And some of them were lawyers, some of them were not, but some of them worked with lawyers. And you just kind of really get a chance to delve into, like I said, I didn't start off with the idea that I wanted to go to law school or become an attorney. But you get a chance to just see what's out there and realize, as Chris had mentioned too, as well, I don't like this, I don't like that. Let me start to pull the elements out of what I do and don't like and figure out a career path.
Phenomenal. So you all started at KU with your bachelor's degrees, but went to very different places for law school. Hugh and Chris, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your Juris Doctor experience. What was your experience like in law school pursuing a JD?
So this is where I'm going to be the weird one out. I loved law school, and that is definitely the general broken position, but I'll explain why. I went to computer science for undergrad, and as much as I really love tech, really love computers, and I use that degree more regularly than I ever thought I would in a legal profession, I was not good at it, and it was so hard and so brutal. But that structured thinking that came from computer science just matched the law school environment entirely. Law school, It's probably unfair to compare it to boot camp, but in a lot of ways, it's like you're deprogramming your brain and reprogramming it in a new way of thinking. They'll tell you that every time you go to any law school you go to. That's exactly what they're going to tell you. We're going to teach you to become a law-trained thinker, writer, speaker, reader. And so part of that training is learning a new structured way of thinking. So having some of those classes in the background, a very structured, very rigid. There is a right answer in computer science where there isn't in law school often, really helped me slot into that space. And then when I got to law school, unlike you, I was not, in undergrad, I was not signing up for everything. I enjoyed some things, but I was very much not putting myself out there as much as I now wish I had. So in law school, I did. I joined like every group I possibly could, including traffic court, which was lots of fun. And so like I did absolutely everything I possibly could, and that was helpful. We haven't quite gotten to this question, but I will say the one thing that is extremely valuable if you ever decide to pursue a law career, become an attorney or a law adjacent career, having more experiences than just law is extremely valuable. Both in your ability to get a job, but also when you get into the job, because everybody who's a lawyer has that law experience. Having more experiences helps you be more valuable to your team, whatever firm or office you're working for, and helps you be more valuable to your client. And so that's like the one thing I would say is, as you're an undergrad and as you are in law school, experience as many different things as possible. Maybe you'll find something that you really like.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed my time in law school as well. I found that because there wasn't a right answer, you really just got a chance to think and be creative about what it is that you were writing. For the most part, you don't have any assignments throughout the year, and myself, I liked having that freedom to be able to do things however I wanted to, and so I felt like it was kind of like, obviously I think it was a little more rigorous than undergrad was, but you get a chance to just it's more rigorous, but you get more freedom. You have less of the what I would consider less of the parental function of universities, where it's like you have to do the clickers throughout the day, or like certain things need to be turned in every 2 days. And like for me, I was like, well, I'm more of a study, the week before the exam, and really kind of maybe just do other things outside of that. And I love the freedom that law gave to just, there's one exam, study for it however you would like. It definitely starts a lot earlier than a week, but I enjoyed that. And I also enjoyed getting a chance to just pick all the kinds of classes that you wanted to do. You were kind of in a certain world or a certain realm of education, but the classes were all over the place. It was a chance to just learn and touch on and learn from people who knew what they were talking about a lot of different areas that I think, especially at the time when I was in law school, were very keen or were hot button issues. So that was exciting.
Thank you both for sharing. I think for a lot of undergraduate students, they have an idea about the myth of law school, whether that be Elle Woods and Legally Blonde or How to Get Away with Murder. I think for a lot of folks, they have this idea that law school can be this really challenging experience. We don't want to minimize that there will be some struggles in law school, right? But would love to hear from all of our panelists on this question. Let's celebrate some successes. What was a challenge that you had in law school, and how did you overcome it? Let's start with Annie on this.
Sure. So Chris and I would have been great study buddies, because I am not a beginning end thinker. I'm out here, and then it's pulling the reins, so a lot of the stuff with legal writing and all that jazz, I loved the research that went behind it and doing it, but then I'm also good enough, and good enough is not good enough in legal writing. So I think learning, it wasn't a huge trial and tribulation, but it was just learning kind of how to push your own boundaries. And what it did was it allowed me to convey the out here thoughts so much clearer and so much more logically, which helped me a lot and helps me like on a daily basis doing what I do. Like that's why I love that the Master's of Jurisprudence had these like baseline law courses where we all learned how to do these things. And then, you know, as you like learn more thorough research methods and all that jazz, you can really like dork out on the stuff you really care about. Like, and I think that that's what makes it really fun too, is to what Chris and Hugh both mentioned, is that like laws and everything. So you can touch every single thing that you want to do. I use law on a daily basis in consulting. Like it's just something that you can see all the time. You know, the beauty of master jurisprudence is that, you know, one thing they say is like, you know, oftentimes by the time people like corporations need lawyers, it's usually too late. They've screwed up and they're like, abort. And having more people that can see the legal lens and like being able to like get ahead of those things, I think like Hugh mentioned, is like hugely beneficial. So I think that being able to like have those challenges in law school and now being able to like bring those kinds of things in my day-to-day life, like there's not a lot I feel like that I see that I'm not able to tackle through like, you know, more thorough research or like really getting both sides of the coin and being able to understand like pros and cons of every situation.
I'll tell you the first major hurdle I ever really experienced in law school was probably my civil procedure final 1L year, which was my fall 1L year. It was an 8-hour final, and just preparing for an 8-hour final is a nightmarish experience if you think about it. But the thing about law school that I loved, unlike computer science, I say this when talking to lots of students, is that things like computer science, like math, there is a right answer. You can do math the wrong way. In law, while there are generally right answers, it's a lot softer. And so what it is it's not like you have to be a genius. You have to have some spark of great ideas that come to you in order to be able to answer these questions. What you have to have is perseverance. It is literally just the classic phrase is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Like that's what law school is, right? You can do it. You just have to work at it, which is what I love about it, right? Anybody can do this job if they can stick with this work. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to take a lot of effort to study and prepare for an 8-hour final, but you can do it. You can get through it, and you can get better because of it as you get through those sets of obstacles that law school is both designed to put in your way, so that you can learn how to get over that. Because when you're out in your career, you're going to have to be able to persevere through a month and a half, 2 months of developing one argument, trying to get things put together, doing all of this research on your own, where you're not going to know, is there a right or wrong answer, until a judge tells you if there's a right or wrong answer, but you're not going to know while you're working on it. And so you have to be able to take those steps, just one step after another, as you're getting through these projects. And so law school is fantastic about teaching you how to do that. It's as I like to say, it's not impossible work. It's just a lot of work. And so you have to really push through each bit of work as it comes towards you. And Lucas, I see your questions. I will answer those questions when we get a little closer to the end.
Yeah, I think one challenge I faced in law school, and I think it's one I found that law school is a lot like life. You know, when you get in there, there's a lot of things you can focus on, right? You can really get in there, and it's just like a kid in the candy store. There's a million different things that you can do, and one of the challenges I faced, especially in the very beginning, was just, and especially because my law school was in downtown Chicago, so there were distractions entirely unrelated to the school itself. Just kind of focusing and having that discipline to be where I wanted to be with, you know, how I was spending my time each day, what I was going to focus my energy on, because there's always a million different things that you can do at once. And, you know, it might be social, it might be work related, it might be, you know, the causes are community related. So there's so many different things that you can do, and just kind of prioritizing and being able to figure out what it is you actually do care about and what it is you're going to spend your time doing on a given day. And law school is a lot like that, especially with the way that you select courses. And I think maybe we'll get to this later on, but just kind of the way that you balance, you know, doing this job and having a life outside of it. I think that unfortunately, because it is a service industry, there is always more work to do. Like it's very rare that you are like, hey, I have completed all the possible tasks that could be completed today. I've never had a day like that, but there's always more to do, and finding a way to figure out where you can get to being like, oh, I'm comfortable here, or no, it is going to have to be an all nighter, or it's not. It's just kind of being able to drill down and do that is what I found challenging, but I thought it was like, prepared for life very well.
Hugh, I want to piggyback off what you say. I think this is a great segue. What is your advice for our students that are looking to find balance in pursuing a legal education and a professional career?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was told to me when I first started, and I follow this a lot. I think that you have to look at balance not over the course, I think, of small segments like a day or a week. You have to look at it over the course of, a month or a span of years even. So I think for myself, when I graduated, I was like, well, I'm used to having, classes, and then also doing social activities, and then also having homework or assignments to do, and then other obligations. And so when I got out, I was like, I'm going to be doing a job, right? And there's not necessarily homework that's outside of the job all the time. There can be, but especially when you're starting, a lot of it is the work that you're doing. And so I was like, well, I have extra time. I personally chose to kind of drill that back into getting into the job. Now that I'm further along, and I've more established a reputation, I think that the biggest thing to do is to establish a reputation that people can trust you, both with your clients and people you work with. Because then when things happen, like last year, the Chiefs went to the Super Bowl. I'm originally from Kansas, so I'm a Chiefs fan, and I was like, well, I'm gonna go out there and work remote, or like, whatever, like fine. Nobody really cared, because they're like, well, you've established yourself there. And so I think in the beginning, I honestly don't think, especially in this profession, I really don't think there's a way to get around, especially in the first, like, I would say few months, get around just kind of learning and working and focusing on the job early on. But then after that, I think it really starts to pan down. And I just look at it in a larger scale of over the course of careers, which are longer. And I imagine my career will be longer than I've been alive currently. It'll all end up panning out. And there's always more times. My work is very cyclical, so I'll be extremely busy for a couple of weeks and then less busy. And so you just kind of get used to being like, well, on the days where I can leave early, I will be leaving early every time.
Annie, how about you? How have you found professional balance, either in law school or in your current role?
Balance has not always been my strength, if I'm very honest. I tend to be like all in on stuff. But I will say I found a lot of joy in like being able to pursue the things that I've wanted to pursue. I think like I'm one of those people that I like to be really intellectually challenged. I like to do different things and learn different things. And I think law school was really, really good about that. It was also nice. I think one challenge I had, especially coming out of the Marine Corps and being an intelligence officer, I was always focused on what was happening internationally, especially in Asia. Learning to turn my brain off and watch the Great British Bake Off or House Hunters International, just learning to flip that switch and just be okay that not all's right in the world now again has been clutch. And I think that's really a life skill that I think law school helped me reinforce, because as Chris mentioned, it's a very, very dense period of time. You're consuming a lot of information, and sometimes it's just just overload. And I think learning to be able to sift through those things, I don't want to call them coping mechanisms because everyone will be scared and they'll leave the call, but as you navigate these things and you're at a point where you have so much information, that's one thing that's challenging about law is sometimes you dig and you're going in a certain direction, and then you find something complete contrary to what you thought to be true and what you thought you were seeking, and you kind of have to be comfortable enough to backtrack and go back forward again, maybe in a different direction. And I think that, like I said, those are life skills that have been really, really helpful for me. I think as I've been a business owner, and it's really easy to go all in on that stuff, and then learning to remember that I'm at my best when I'm also rested. And so like recognizing that more isn't always more, I think has been like a really good life skill that law taught me. And you really have no choice. Like law like forces you to like do that. And so I think that that's been like a helpful thing for me that's translated into like other areas of my life that I can directly tie to my time in law school. I wish I had that like while I was in the Marine Corps. I just didn't, you know? And I think that would have helped me a lot in a lot of different areas, just being able to like manage the wide array of stuff coming your way.
More is not always more is the most important thing, because
Yes.
I think for most people who are law trained, you're inherently curious. I think it draws people who have ADHD like flies. And so there's a real tendency to just dive down rabbit holes and stay there for hours. And learning to turn that off is the most important thing. The other thing, though, that I've really experienced like the first couple of years of my law career, which didn't help that COVID hit not too long after the start of my law career, was that you have to, it's really easy to become only about work, right? It's extremely easy in law school and afterwards to just be about work. All you think about is law. All you talk about is law. The people you hang out with are lawyers. It is really important to consciously be aware of that and go do something else, anything else. I joined a choir for a little bit and then inadvertently started running that choir and had to leave. But like, I go do something else, find something else that keeps you motivated that isn't law related, so that when you're doing the law work, you aren't burnt out.
All great advice. I'm going to ask one more question before we open up to questions from our students here tonight. So students, please feel free to share more questions in the chat or in the Q&A function. Thank you to our panelists that have been furiously typing away while sharing insight and their pearls of wisdom. We'll also give you some great engagement in the Q&A as well. So last question before we pivot to some Q&A. We have a lot of freshmen tonight. We have some seniors too, that they're in the middle of their applications. What advice do you have for undergraduate students that are interested in maybe your career or looking at law school?
I'll pop in here for seniors. If you have not signed up for the LSAT, do so now. Although I think most of you probably already have, or if your law school is only doing the GRE, take the GRE. But the other thing that you really need to be working on is identifying people to write your letters of recommendation. It's one of the harder steps and it takes a little bit of time. But the thing that I would tell you the most is be genuine while you're also like pumping up your own successes, right? In your personal note or your any application materials. Be genuine, right? Don't use a lot of fake language that you wouldn't have used in your normal life. Don't try to sound, like you're quoting Lincoln if you don't ordinarily quote Lincoln. But do talk about the successes. You all will have had successes. Even if I'll be perfectly blunt. I dealt with a lot of depression in undergrad, extreme depression that really was difficult to get through. And so I didn't think I had a whole lot of successes, but some people who helped me out really helped me identify what was it that you did successfully? What were the things that were challenging that you were able to overcome? Really highlight those things. For freshmen, the best thing you can do right now is find, in my opinion, find like a group or something like that you care about and get involved in more than just attend the meeting once every 3 months sort of way, right? Like get involved. If you're in a scholarship hall, get involved in the ASHC. If you're wanting to get involved in student government, go to the meetings in the series of orders that you have to do in order to actually be able to speak in student government. Cause I think you have to go to like 2 meetings in a row before you can speak. Or get involved in advocacy groups, or heck, I did theater in undergrad. I loved it. I did a show. It was one of the most fun things I did in undergrad. Do different things so that while you're developing your law school application, you're not just doing things because you want to have it on a law school application. You want to do it because it's enjoyable to you. And if it's enjoyable to you, you'll be able to talk about it in your law school application in a very genuine way.
And I want to go right after Chris because I want to double click on that for sure. I would say, in a similar vein of like being very true to yourself, like stay true to like the stuff that you find interesting and like the things that you care about and the passions that you have, as bizarre as they are, because law touches all those things, like I've mentioned before. And like you'll find that there's space, there is a need for legal lens in everything that you touch in your day-to-day life. Except maybe Great British Bake Off. But everything else, there is a voting system though. There's so many things that you go through in your day-to-day life that like probably like you thoroughly enjoy. And I think to like Chris's point, like just seeking out those like top-notch opportunities that make you like, I've been born and bred to be a law person, like that. There's a reason that they take people from all different backgrounds, because that's what makes law valuable, and it'll change the way that you go through law school, the way you interact in law school, and the experiences that you bring. I was so grateful for having a very like bizarre, non-traditional background being in law school. I was also grateful to be older. Like, quite frankly, I don't think I could have done it when, you know, a lot of people go to law school, which is right after undergrad. I just wasn't there yet. And I think the ability to go back to law school and really study what I want to study versus like studying what I thought would make me money, I think is really, really critical. I think a lot of people think lawyers are rolling in the dough, and certainly some of them are, but that won't get you through those long nights at the library. Like, I promise you, there's easier ways to make a buck, okay, than go through law school. So I would encourage you to like really pursue your passions and like, you know, to a certain extent, and like understand that like you can do so much with legal education that isn't just being a lawyer. So much of our work on a daily basis has to do with these things, and it changes the way you live your life in the best way. So don't feel like you're bound to the courtroom. If you know you're interested in law but you aren't really sure where it's going to go, trust your gut, lean into it, see what you can find, and you'll never know where you end up.
Yeah, I think all of those. I agree with all of those, and I would just say two things. One, I think it's going to apply to everyone, regardless of whether you're a senior or not. And I think maybe this is not well known. I didn't know this when I was applying, but people think that law schools they just go around the country and they pick the people with the best grades and the greatest majors, and that is absolutely not at all what they're doing. Part of the way that the education gets taught is you use people's experiences in order to teach people through a method they call the Socratic method. Quite frankly, I didn't study philosophy, so I have no idea why it's called the Socratic method, but it's just a lot of talking and people sharing their opinions and thoughts on things. And when you have everybody with the same exact perspective, it generally hurts the entire class. These schools want to build great classes that go on and do great things, so you can donate money back to the school, number one. But number two, you can go and be a fantastic alumni and do great things. And so I would not focus on trying to be like, oh, I'm going to be I didn't have any Latin honors at any point when I was in any part of my education level. And so like, I think that people try to go out there and just do, what have I seen lawyers do? Let me go be a journalism major to start. If you're interested in journalism, absolutely do that. But focus on the things that you care about, because you're going to perform better, which is ultimately probably what you were thinking about in the first place. And second of all, you're going to be more interesting. Interesting people come from doing things they're interested in. You don't just do a bunch of things that other people think are interesting and then become an interesting person. And then when you have those experiences, it gives you an opportunity to actually have something to write about when you go and write and do your applications. So that's one I think it applies to all of them. Another one I think is more on the earlier side. I would start writing and doing the application, honestly, probably as early as possible, because it is going to take a ton of iterations. I did 5 years in undergrad because I transferred, and I honestly genuinely think it's impossible to transfer and be an athlete and graduate in 4 years. I'd tell myself that, obviously, probably make myself feel better, but I did a 5th year, and that 5th year I was like applying and everything. I had basically that whole year to apply, and I was just finishing out. So I think that helps a ton, because it's on top of your social life and on top of your education and getting your credits. It is a lot of work to write these things. And I think it's actually more exhausting than regular schoolwork, because you're like sitting there like the personal statements, silly, just like tell me about yourself. But it's like, well, my law school application kind of rides on this whole thing because everybody has a resume, right? So those would be the two things I would point out.
It's also just really hard to talk about yourself and not feel like you're just like lying. And then that is a thing that's very, very difficult.
We have one question from Trinity. After your first year of law school, were you able to get a better understanding of what courses or topics you wanted to pursue for the remainder of your professional career?
Definitely on my end. Like, I thought I was focused on international development, and I certainly was. That was definitely a through line. But I started taking classes on like corporate social responsibility at the time. Now it's like ESG. And I think that that was something that I got really into and realized the impact that, like, you know, I used to think that the only way you could make a large impact was through like nonprofits and NGOs. And I think realizing that like major corporations, especially international ones, play a major role in like providing positive impact. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of resources, they can make a big impact. I think all those things were really, really critical. And I didn't even know that was a thing until I was past my first year of law school.
Yeah, the curriculum at most law schools is set for you your first year, but the way that they do the way that they teach it, a lot of it is through cases. And I think especially a lot of law schools now, I think because there's a lot more current events that are interesting in the law, I think people are really fired up about the law over the last 5 years, more so than probably any other point. But they start to bring a lot of those through pieces in. And so I think when they teach it through cases, you'll see certain things and you'll be like, oh, I think that's interesting. Or you'll say, oh, well, that topic of discussion was interesting in this class. Or you'll have like a contracts class and they'll talk about a different area of law that you might think is interesting. And you start to talk to the professors, or you start to, if it's a large enough kind of field, like maybe like intellectual property or something like that, like there's different clubs and things you can get involved with. But I think the very first year is just more of it kind of opens your eyes to what is out there. Like I said, when I started law school, I thought that meant that you had to go to court. And then I realized, wait a minute, I don't have to do that. That's actually way cooler. And so then, I mean, I think I took my first year of classes that were prescribed for me, and then I was able to pick electives my second year. I think I took almost exclusively business classes. Outside of that, like I was not taking law classes, not because I didn't like the law, but because I was like, well, I like the business law side of this more, or I like it to be a little more interactive, if you will, rather than like long papers and like research. I was avoiding research at all costs. I still do that to this day. But so I think, you know, when you first start in there, you get a chance to see all different types of topics. And I think you start with kind of cool general ones, like, again, like contracts, legal writing generally. And then you can start, I mean, civil procedure, I think is not interesting at all. But
oh, come on. It's my favorite thing.
It's very meticulous. It's not for me. I don't remember any of the rules, thankfully. But and another one's like criminal law too. So it's like you kind of touch a bunch of different areas that really wouldn't interact with each other most of the time. And so you can kind of find what you like. You know, if you start to show up to class and you're like, oh, I'm looking forward to this class, you can really start to find out why that reason is and start to drill down on what that is.
And to Hugh's point, I know we're running out of time, but I think what's so mind-blowing about law school too is because you have people from all these different backgrounds, like you'll find people super interested in a facet of law that you're like, how? Like we had so many people that were like tax, and you're like, tax law, like that sounds horrible. But they thought what I was doing was like awful. So I think that that's the fun part too, is you also figure out what you don't want to do. Like you touch stuff and you're like, never again will I dabble in that space. And I think that's just as important as what you do want to do.
Yeah, the first year is often a lot of just scare you to death sort of stuff. They throw a lot of stuff at you, but you also have the opportunity both in your summer, your first year, as well as through clubs and organizations in that first year to really start to feel out what is interesting to you in the law. You'll get to meet lots of lawyers if you go to the horrible networking events that everybody just finds so awful, but you go to them because you need to meet people, and you get to meet people and talk about what is it, the thing that you do that's so exciting. or you can talk to me and listen about how much I hate bankruptcy. But there's it. Yes, it gets a lot after your first year, really after your first semester, it gets easier and you get more focused on what you actually want to do, what you want out of your career. And it's not to say that you will know even once you graduate exactly what you want. I had absolutely no idea when I graduated that I would be suing drug companies and doing antitrust work. I didn't take an antitrust course in law school, had no idea what was going on, took this opportunity, said yes, and now I get to work with some of the smartest people across the country on some of the most complex and difficult and, pressing issues across the country. And so it's you'll get those experiences. Do not worry if you do not know what you want immediately out of law school or into law school.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback off that too, like a lot of the times, I think there's this urge, especially people in the legal profession tend to be type A. There's this urge to try to create like an entire, life plan until, from birth to death. But, a lot of the industries didn't exist. Like the other day, I had to go research about whether certain banks could fund different types of like marijuana businesses. And it's like, well, nobody was doing that. When I was in law school, nobody was doing that at all. It was just straight up the federal government was like, no, if you're an FDIC insured bank, you can't do this. And now it's not necessarily the case. But you never know what industries or sectors are out there. I know AI is a big one. I try to avoid that at all costs. But there's just so many different industries that you don't know that are out there. And, I think the nice thing about law is that I think it just prepares you to be in a good opportunity to go after whatever it is that you want, whatever that may be. And I would actually probably kind of caution people away from trying to figure out exactly what that super right specific thing is, because people change and, like there's careers are long and there's a lot of things that people do. A lot of people in retirement don't do the same thing they do in their career. And that's because there's just different things that are interesting and different things that pop up in the world for you.
I would say have an idea, but don't be committed to it. Like I really thought that I wanted to go do patent law because you can make a lot of money in patent law. And I thought I was really interested in that stuff. I thought, really was passionate about it. Spent 6 months studying patents and I got some really nice naps that semester and couldn't do it. So just have an idea, explore, but don't be committed to anything that until you really find something that gets you passionate.
And be open to whatever comes your way. Because
yes,
the career I've had is a product of something that I didn't really know was going to lead me there. So
I every job I have had in the legal field, I didn't apply for that exact job. I applied for another job and an opportunity came up because of that application.
Amazing. Thank you all. We're at time, but if you have a couple minutes, I want to hold you guys to one more question. In one sentence, if you go back and give your undergraduate self any advice based on your legal education, based on your professional career now, what is your one sentence of advice you could share to your younger KU self?
Trust yourself and trust that it's all gonna trust your gut and understand that it's all gonna work out the way it's supposed to, and be open to opportunities and mentors that come into your life and kind of be willing to go with the ebb and flow, because I think that's what my entire career has been about. Things I thought I would do forever, I'm not doing, and things I never knew I'd dabble in, that's what I do now. So be okay with that.
I will give something that is probably a little more practical, but it's be willing to talk to the free or reduced price therapists that KU offers, because I needed that. And it took a long time for me to admit that I needed that in undergrad. Had I done that, I would have probably had a little bit of a better time in undergrad. I think generally speaking, y'all's generation's a little more comfortable with that sort of conversation. So, and that was definitely one sentence. It was just a run on.
Gotta master the semicolon. That's the answer to getting that one sentence in there. I would just say to be in the driver's seat, because no one we're all here on this call, and I'm just going to go over the one sentence. Sorry, Jake, but you're all here on this call, and all of you have different wants and desires and things that you want. You know, no one's going to want for you great things more than you do, except for maybe your parents. But you know, kind of raise your hand and say, hey, I'm interested in something, or I want to learn about this or that. And if you put yourself out there, people will respond to that very well. I think that lawyers always like to help other lawyers, or at least they like to talk about themselves. So if you just call them up and ask them about what they do, they'll tell you. And you can be like, well, that job sounds like it's terrible, and I will be avoiding that job. But just put yourself out there and kind of be in the driver's seat and create whatever it is that you want to build in life. And ultimately you'll end up where it is that you want to be.
Trust yourself, put yourself in the driver's seat, and be willing to practice wellness and self-care. Chris, Hugh, and Annie, thank you so much for joining us tonight for Beyond KU, Pre-Law and You. We are so proud of the work you're doing as alumni, and we hope to see you back here in Mount Oriad in the future. To all of our students that joined us tonight, thank you so much for choosing KU and choosing to make us your home for your pre-law journey. As you all continue to navigate your journey, please know that Pre-Law Advising and University Career Center are here to advocate for you. We are here to be your cheerleaders, your coaches, your advocates for you as you continue to navigate your time here at KU. And with that, I think the sun is setting here in Lawrence. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and have a great evening.
And Jake, if I can add one quick thing, if people have more questions that they were not able to answer or didn't feel comfortable answering in this setting, Jake's got my email. Feel free to reach out. I am always happy to talk your ear off about anything.
Same here, and my LinkedIn. Find me.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Just echo that. You can if you just Google unfortunately for me, my phone number is on the internet, but
everyone text you.
Thank you all tonight. We appreciate the work you're doing as great alumni and as panelists tonight. Thank you all, and have a great evening. Rock chalk.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
see everyone.